Imagine this. What if you knew the exact moment you were going to die? Would you face it with calm acceptance? Or would there be a part of you wondering, is something darker at play? For one of history's greatest spiritual figures, this wasn't just some philosophical question. In the year 483 BC, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, embarked on what would become his final journey. He was 80 years old. His body was frail, worn from a lifetime of travel and teaching, but his mind, sharp as ever. And he knew, deep down, that his time on this earth was drawing to a close. But here's the question. Was it really just the toll of old age? Or could something more deliberate have hastened the end of the Enlightened One? Hi everyone, I'm Peter, and today we're taking a deep dive into one of the great spiritual mysteries of our world, Buddha's final days. We'll follow his last footsteps, explore the wisdom he left behind, and unravel one of the oldest controversies in religious history. Was the Buddha poisoned? Why, even after more than 2,500 years, does the death of this enlightened master still captivate us? What secrets did he take to the grave, and what timeless lessons remain for us today? This is the untold story of Buddha's final days, a journey of mystery, wisdom, and perhaps betrayal. Buddha's final journey began in the city of Rajagaha. By this time, the Buddha was 80 years old. His body had grown weak, but his spirit and intellect were as clear and steady as ever. And despite his declining health, Buddha made a remarkable decision. He would travel north, over 200 miles, to a town called Kushinagar. Why such a long and difficult journey so late in life? As the Buddha and his faithful disciple Ananda set out on the road, whispers quickly spread among his followers. Why this trek? Why now? Some believed the Buddha knew this would be his final journey. Others thought it was a living demonstration of his teachings, a final lesson in impermanence and non-attachment. Along the way, the Buddha stopped in many villages and towns, offering teachings and comfort to those who gathered to see him. He spoke openly about the inevitability of change, the importance of compassion, and the path to liberation. Each step brought him closer to his final resting place. Yet even in these last days, the Buddha remained unwavering in his mission to guide others. Now this was no easy journey. As the days passed, Buddha's physical condition worsened. His body weakened, but his mind, his presence remained strong. And this in itself became a teaching, an act of living wisdom. Here was the Buddha showing his followers exactly how to face life's ultimate challenge, death itself, with grace, dignity, and awareness. During this final pilgrimage, a question lingered in the minds of his disciples. Did the Buddha know his end was near? The evidence suggests he did. In the Mahaparinibbāṇa Sutta, an ancient Buddhist text that recounts the Buddha's last days, there's a remarkable moment. The Buddha turns to Ananda and calmly says, 3 months from now, the Tathagata will pass into final nirvana. This wasn't just a passing comment. According to the texts, the Buddha had consciously chosen to let go of life, relinquishing any will to extend it further. But his foreknowledge went even deeper. The Buddha carefully planned the final chapter of his life, selecting where he would give his last teachings, resolving old disputes among his disciples, and even arranging the details of his own funeral rites. What's truly remarkable is how he used his own death as a final, profound lesson, not with fear or sadness, but with calm clarity. He showed his followers that mortality itself could be faced with equanimity, that even in death, there was something to be taught and something to be learned. As the journey drew closer to its end, the Buddha and his small group arrived in a humble village called Pava. There, a devoted blacksmith named Chunda invited the Buddha and his disciples to his home for a meal. Little did Chunda know that this simple act of generosity would become one of the most talked about meals in religious history.
But soon after the meal, he fell ill. He experienced severe stomach pain and dysentery. And yet, in the midst of his suffering, the Buddha's compassion shone through. Turning to Ananda, he instructed his beloved disciple to reassure Kunda, telling him that offering this final meal to a Buddha was an act of great merit and not something to feel guilt or regret over. Despite his failing condition, the Buddha insisted on continuing his journey to Kushinagar. He pressed on, resting often, his resilience serving as yet another powerful teaching to those around him. This meal, and the Buddha's response to it, would come to symbolize his deep acceptance of life and its inevitable suffering without complaint. Of course, this event sparked endless debate, and still does today. Was it simply a case of spoiled food or illness? Or was there something more sinister at play? Over the centuries, theories of poisoning have circulated. Some suggest it was an accident. Others whisper of jealous rivals or misguided attempts at spiritual testing. Yet many modern scholars dismiss the poisoning theory altogether, viewing it as a later embellishment to the story. Most believe the Buddha's symptoms were simply the result of his advanced age, combined with the physical strain of his final journey. Interestingly, the Buddha himself seemed to reject any notion of foul play. In his final words about the meal, he praised Kunda's offering, equating it in spiritual merit with the meal that had sustained him on the night of his enlightenment. This controversy, whether true or not, reminds us of the blurred lines between history, legend, and spiritual teaching. Regardless of the cause, this last meal remains a powerful symbol of the Buddha's teachings on acceptance, impermanence, and the illusory nature of the physical world. After this long and arduous journey, the Buddha finally arrived in Kushinagar, a small, quiet town nestled in the foothills of the Himalayas. At first glance, Kushinagar was an unremarkable place, but it would soon become one of the most sacred sites in all of Buddhism. Upon entering the town, the Buddha gave a very specific instruction to Ananda. "Prepare a resting place for me between two sal trees." Now this was no random choice. The Buddha had been born beneath a tree, and now he would pass away beneath these twin sal trees, completing the circle of his earthly existence. Even in these final moments, the Buddha was teaching. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with brilliant hues, the Buddha lay down on his right side, his head pointing north. In an almost mystical moment, the sal trees, as if sensing the significance of this occasion, burst into an unseasonal bloom, showering pale petals over the scene. Kushinagar, once a sleepy town, was now the stage for one of the most profound events in spiritual history. Lying beneath the sal trees, the Buddha seized this last opportunity to share his most essential teachings. Despite his frail body, his mind remained sharp, his words calm and filled with the wisdom of a lifetime. Kneeling close was his devoted disciple, Ananda. For decades, Ananda had been at the Buddha's side, learning from him, spreading his teachings. But now the inevitable was drawing near. Ananda struggled with a heavy heart. How could he bear the loss of his teacher, his guide, his dear friend? Seeing this, the Buddha turned to him and spoke with gentle compassion. "You have done much good, Ananda. You have stood by me through all things. Do not let sorrow cloud your mind. The time for your own awakening is near." Even now, with his life slipping away, the Buddha was teaching, not just the group of followers, but personally guiding Ananda toward acceptance and wisdom. Turning next to the assembled monks, the Sangha, the Buddha invited questions. If any of you have doubts about the Dharma, the path, or the teachings, speak now. Do not later regret that you missed this opportunity. But there was silence, a testament to the clarity of the Buddha's lifetime of teachings. At this moment, the Buddha shared what would come to be known as the Four Great References, a safeguard to ensure that after his passing, the Dharma would remain intact and pure. He instructed the monks, "In the future, if anyone claims to speak the Buddha's words, compare them carefully with the sutras and the Vinaya, the recorded teachings and monastic code."
In other words, stick to the core teachings. This guidance would protect the Dharma from distortion in the centuries to come. And once more, the Buddha turned to Ananda. With great tenderness, he praised Ananda's years of loyal service. "You have done much good, Ananda," he said. "Strive on, and soon you will be free from all impurities." Perhaps the most important message in these final teachings was this: everything, absolutely everything, is impermanent. All compounded things must pass away, the Buddha reminded them. And so, he urged his followers to seek liberation through their own diligent practice. These final moments encapsulated everything the Buddha had taught across a lifetime: impermanence, non-attachment, mindfulness, and the path to awakening. As night fell over Kushinagar, the Buddha's final hours drew near. Despite his deteriorating body, his mind remained crystal clear, as steady as the stars in the sky above. But for Ananda, the weight of this moment was almost unbearable. He had served faithfully for years, yet now, as the inevitable approached, the teachings of non-attachment were difficult to hold. How could he simply let go of the teacher who had shown him the path to liberation? The Buddha sensed this turmoil within Ananda and again spoke with compassionate wisdom. "Ananda, do not mourn me. All that arises must pass away. Even this body is subject to decay. What I have taught you is true. Do not cling, not even to this." And with these words, a sense of peace washed over Ananda's heart. It was a final, loving reminder that the deepest act of love is sometimes to let go. During these precious final moments, the Buddha's compassion remained extraordinary. When he heard that a wandering ascetic named Subhadda wished to speak with him, Ananda, concerned for his teacher's condition, tried to refuse the visitor. But the Buddha said simply, "Let him come. He seeks the path." Even in his final hours, the Buddha was ready to teach. And so, Subhadda was welcomed. After a short but profound discourse, Subhadda became the Buddha's final direct disciple, attaining enlightenment just hours before the Buddha's passing. This moment once again revealed the Buddha's unwavering commitment to guiding others right up until his very last breath. As midnight approached, the Buddha addressed the gathered monks one final time. He encouraged them, continue on the path, practice diligently. All compounded things are subject to dissolution. Even in these moments, the Buddha remained the embodiment of equanimity, living the wisdom he had taught for so many years. The air grew heavy with emotion. The monks knew this was the end. The final hour of the Enlightened One had arrived, marking not just the close of an extraordinary life, but the beginning of a lasting legacy. As the night deepened, the Buddha entered his final meditation. The monks gathered quietly around him, watching with reverent silence. What they witnessed was remarkable. Even now, the Buddha demonstrated the power of a fully awakened mind, moving smoothly through the deep meditative states, the jhanas, that he had mastered so many years ago. His breath slowed. His body became still, yet there was a subtle radiance that seemed to surround him. Even in these last moments, the Buddha was offering one more lesson: how to face death with full awareness, with serenity, with grace. Then, suddenly, the earth itself trembled. A soft light filled the grove. The Buddha opened his eyes. With boundless compassion, he looked upon his disciples one final time and spoke his last words. "Now, monks, I declare to you, all conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence." And with that final breath, the Buddha entered Parinirvana, the state beyond birth and death. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The assembled monks, despite years of teaching on impermanence, sat in stunned silence, faced with the reality of this profound moment. Then Anuruddha, one of the Buddha's chief disciples, quietly spoke. "The Master has attained final Nibbana." As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the Sal Grove. The news began to spread. The Buddha, the Enlightened One, had passed into final Nirvana. An era ended, but the impact of this moment would ripple through history. In the stillness of that morning, the Buddha's last words echoed in the minds of his followers. All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. These were not merely parting words from a dying teacher. They were a distilled summary of the Buddha's entire philosophy, a final reminder of life's core truths. First, all things are impermanent. Even the most enlightened being is subject to the natural law of change and dissolution. Second, strive with diligence. Do not despair at endings. Instead, renew your efforts on the path to awakening. In these simple lines, the Buddha left behind a powerful call to action, a timeless guide for all who would follow the path. As word of the Buddha's passing spread, the reactions among his disciples were as varied as human emotion itself. Some of the younger monks wept openly. Their cries of grief pierced the quiet morning air. "Too soon has the Blessed One passed away," they lamented. Others sat in stunned silence, grappling with the weight of the loss. But the elder monks, those who had most deeply absorbed the Buddha's teachings, remained composed. Anuruddha reminded them gently, "Friends, do not sorrow, do not lament. Has not the Blessed One taught us that all things pleasant and delightful are changeable, subject to separation and becoming other?" And so, amidst the grief, the Sangha began to embody the very teachings they had received. Ananda, though filled with deep sadness, took on the duty of informing the local Malla clan, in whose territory Kushinagar lay, of the Buddha's passing. The news spread quickly. The Mallas came bearing flowers, incense, and musical offerings. For 7 days they honored the Buddha with songs, dances, and devotions. It was not a time of mourning alone, but a celebration of the Buddha's life and teachings. This moment, this first response to the Buddha's death, became a living lesson in Buddhist practice. How even in the face of profound loss, one can choose to honor life
embrace impermanence, and continue on the path. The Buddha's death was not the end, but a powerful beginning. His entry into Parinirvana set in motion a legacy that would shape the spiritual world for millennia. In the days following his passing, the Buddha's closest disciples gathered in what became the First Buddhist Council. Their mission? To carefully preserve and record the Buddha's teachings, ensuring that his wisdom would endure long after his physical form was gone. This monumental effort laid the foundation for Buddhism's spread, first across Asia and eventually around the world. Buddha's final days became a teaching in themselves. His foreknowledge of death, his calm acceptance, his unwavering serenity, all reinforced the heart of his message: impermanence, mindful living, liberation through personal effort. Even now, more than 2,500 years later, these moments continued to inspire Buddhist practitioners everywhere. In truth, the Buddha's death also shaped the philosophy of Buddhism in profound ways. It demonstrated that even an enlightened one was subject to the laws of nature. This reinforced the essential Buddhist understanding that reality itself is impermanent, constantly changing. But perhaps even more importantly, the Buddha's passing transformed him from a living teacher into a universal symbol of enlightenment. Temples, statues, and stupas containing his relics spread across the world, becoming focal points for devotion, reflection, and the continued practice of the Dharma. Today, over 2.5 millennia later, the Buddha's influence is as strong as ever. His teachings on mindfulness, compassion, and the nature of the mind have reached new audiences, not only in Asia, but around the world. Modern fields such as psychology, neuroscience, and even popular culture draw wisdom from the insights of the Buddha. In both his life and his death, the Buddha left us with this profound truth. True immortality is not found in the preservation of the body, but in the enduring impact of wisdom shared and lives transformed. As we come to the close of this exploration of the Buddha's final days, one thing is clear. His passing was not simply an ending, but a final, powerful teaching. A demonstration of impermanence, a lesson in mindfulness, and a call to live fully, with purpose, with compassion, and with awareness. From his foreknowledge of death to his last words, the Buddha showed us how to face life's greatest challenge with grace and wisdom. And perhaps this is the question that remains for each of us. If you knew today was your last, what would you do differently? How can we, like the Buddha, live each moment with intention, with presence, knowing that all things are subject to change? So I leave you with this challenge. Take the Buddha's final words to heart. Let the knowledge of impermanence inspire you to action. What will you do today, this week, this year, to live more fully, more mindfully? If this story has inspired you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to dive deeper into Buddhist wisdom and how it applies to our modern lives, be sure to like and subscribe. We have many more journeys ahead. And remember, as the Buddha taught us, every ending is also a beginning. Until next time, may you find peace in impermanence. Namaste.